I welcome everyone and anyone who ever listens to this recording. Now, this recording, this speech is going to be one of the most important ones because this is the point. We have spoken about feathers, jhanas, all those things, and they might seem very manifold, like, oh, there are feathers, there are hindrances, there are jhanas, there is this, there is that, there's feeling, all those different formations. But what is the point of even knowing about them? Now, and to get to the point, now this is where we get to the point, because here you, as you see, we gave the name insight knowledges. Now, what does insight knowledge mean? Insight knowledge means that you gain an insight into something. You get to know something which you might have not known before. And the insight knowledge are exactly those things that eventually help the being abandon the feathers. So there is no other way to abandon the feathers than by penetrating with the mind the insight knowledges. We will speak in detail about all of them. As I said, we spoke about jhanas and everything, and I said that here everything comes to a junction point. It is because everything like feelings, jhanas, form, memory, all these things, views as well, perception, everything, we call them in general formation. Now, what is a formation? Anything that is included within the 5 aggregates of form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Whatever is included in the changing 5 aggregates is called a formation. And the insight knowledges help us abandon the feathers, because if you look at the feathers, all of them are concerning the 5 aggregates. Is in a way and another way to be entangled with the 5 aggregates or the feathers. So these insight knowledges let us help us to abandon these feathers, and there is no other way to abandon the feathers than by penetrating through reality with the insight knowledges. Now, without further ado, let's jump right into it now. Sometimes they say that there are 10 insight knowledges, sometimes they say that there are 9, and I will give the reason for which sometimes they say that there are 10, there are 9, like what is the point? The point is that all those meditations that you take an object and you concentrate on that object, namely jhanas, or not necessarily jhanas, just for example, if you meditate on peace or characteristics of the teaching, those are also types of meditation, not necessarily jhanas. So all those things, when you concentrate it and you develop the attention and one-pointedness, all these things have a meaning if you can use them up here and now. Because yes, jhanas are beautiful, they're very pleasant, only that they're impermanent and lead to further suffering. That's the only problem with them. And in fact, this is the only problem with everything in the world. And those jhanas, for example, in particular, are useful for the insight knowledges. Because why? Even jhanas are formations. Why? Because they make part of consciousness, because they are a type of consciousness, and because they have jhana factors, and those are also so-called formations, because they make part from the 5 aggregates, obviously. And the point is that you can penetrate through the reality in 2 ways. One way is a so-called bare insight. Now, bare insight means that you just take the aggregates and with, so to say, a bare eye, you look into them and you say, this is suffering, this is impermanent, this has no self, and you penetrate them through with the insight knowledges. Just like, this is why it's called bare insight, because you don't choose off a specific tool, and that specific tool in fact is a jhana. So imagine that you enter infinite space, okay, and you come out of it and you investigate its qualities, and then you say, well, this is impermanent, and you go back, you come out and you say again, yes, this is impermanent. So this is a so-called making the jhana the basis of insight. So or it can be even a fine material jhana, to simply enter first, second, third, fourth, fifth jhana, and so to say, through that jhana, you contemplate how impermanent things are, how much suffering they bring, and how ultimately everything and everything is without a self. So these are the two ways how you can do insight knowledges: bare insight or with jhanas. Now, in fact, there is not too big of a difference here, because naturally the being tends to do bare insight or with jhanas. Just in order to do insight knowledge with jhanas, you have to have jhana attainment, else you do bare insight, and that is also enough. So one can become an arahant theoretically even without having any jhana, which of course normally doesn't happen, because in order to get there, many times beings have already attained those jhanas in previous lives, and right now they many times just relearn them. So normally it's not quite possible to not enter jhanas, but theoretically it's possible to become a bare insight worker and just penetrate through reality and become an arahant as such. Now, this is why there are 9 or 10 insight knowledges, because the first one, or rather I would say the 0th one, is the knowledge of comprehension. Now, the knowledge of comprehension simply means when you take, for example, a jhana, that is the knowledge of comprehension. That is why I call it the 0th, because it's not necessary to have such a knowledge. As I said, now the Abhidhamma, which is the higher teaching, so to say, speaks about the knowledge of comprehension as the first one. As for example, the Vishuddhimagga, which is quite well written commentary on the Abhidhamma, doesn't even take it into consideration as different insight knowledge. So this is when a being, has this comprehension to enter jhanas and to observe reality from that jhana, and to see that everything is impermanent, that those jhana factors are impermanent, that are suffering, and they can go through all the insight knowledges about jhanas, as jhanas are also formation. But let's take now the very important parts of the insight knowledges, and those who are with me, Dhammas, you can, come and interrupt me whenever if there is a question or anything like that. So here we start the real importance, because what's the point with the feathers? The point is that feathers are like dreams. For example, I will refer to identity most of the time during this speak, not because it's the only formation, but because it's the most predominant, because that is the very first feather that has to be abandoned. Without abandoning identity view, there is no spiritual progress, we would say. Yes, you can enter jhanas too, but as long as you have not moved out these barriers from your life, you still will suffer. So no matter how great jhanas you can enter, if you have identity view, starting with identity view and all the other feathers, suffering comes like a shadow. Even if you enter a jhana like a shadow, suffering is there. And here the point is that these dreams of the feathers seem very permanent, very, I'm here. This is identity. And people think most of the times, beings in general, that identities are something very normal, or that I am attached to the aggregates, to the form. Oh, I am the form, and I am the feeling, I am the experiencer, I am my own memories, the memories made me who I am, such things. These are identification with aggregates. And the whole point is that you want to get rid of these, because you understand that these are the things that make you suffer. And suffering doesn't come from somewhere else. It's not the gods who make you suffer. It is your own ignorance that makes you suffer. I have a friend who said, I will work with the insight knowledges after I finish my stress. And we said that your stress comes from the feathers. It doesn't come from somewhere else. Whatever is so-called stressful is only the feathers and nothing else in existence. So, as I said, these things seem very permanent, and as if they had their rightful place in our life, for example, identity. And therefore, the very first insight knowledge is called the knowledge of rise and fall. Now, what does this mean? The knowledge of rise and fall, at the very, there are levels, in fact, but the very basic level, if you want to shake yourself out from this view that I am the same yesterday, today, tomorrow, in every moment, you have to understand that the I-ness, for example, or the identity, better said, because I-ness is different than the identity. Identity means that you are identified. I-ness means that you feel that you exist. Both of them can be considered feathers. But the very first one is that you identify with something. And in order to shake yourself out of this wrong view, you have to see that, for example, whenever you eat, for example, a piece of chocolate, this is an example, it's never the same feeling, it's never the same observer, it's never the same experiencer, because you cannot name, so to say, observer that now I am eating a chocolate. The form is eating the chocolate, if you want to be very precise. See, because if you want to see reality for what it is, you say I, what does it even mean? It doesn't mean anything, it's conventional. It's easy to use it, but it doesn't mean anything. In fact, when we say I just ate a chocolate, it means that the form consumed another form, right? The chocolate, namely. And you have to understand that the body itself is a rise and fall. Why? Because it continuously, even if you just think about very obvious things, is that your blood is flowing all the time. Air is changing, carbon dioxide with oxygen continuously in the cells, change and or let out from the body, that in the form there is nothing permanent. And if you say that I ate a chocolate, and obviously you mean the form because it was the body that ate the chocolate, certainly cannot say that the I was permanent, because it has momentary existence. Right now the body is like this, next moment it's already absolutely different. So there are no two moments in existence in which two things were the same, or anything was the same after one moment passes. So the rise and fall on means that we understand that feelings, for example, as I said, formations, because during the insight knowledges, the object of your concentration, the object of your contemplation are the formations. Formations mean the five aggregates, and there are manifold manifestations. So even if I speak about the form, does it rise and fall? Rise and fall simply means that in a way it means that it comes to be and then it ceases to be in that way. In a way, this is what it means. Or feelings are even more obvious. Do they rise and fall? Yes, obviously, because feelings depend on the object that created those feelings. And the mental continuum is also continuously changing. So feelings cannot be permanent. It comes, it goes. It comes, it goes. It rises and falls continuously. If you think about views, opinions, choices, do they rise and fall? Yes, obviously, because a view is there when you give rise to it. It's not there when you don't give rise to it. If views were eternal, or if views were yourself, then you would experience them 24/7. But it's not the case. They are there when you give rise to them. But if you don't contact those ideas, they don't exist. That's very much it. So it continuously rises and falls according to what the mind does. Perception in the sense of memory as another aggregate. Does it change? Does it rise and fall? Yes, because even if you think twice about the same thing, like, recollecting from the past something like, oh, I remember this, you never remember the same way. It's impossible to remember in the same way because the objects, for example, that you observed previous to the remembering also have, for example, if you had a pleasant feeling from something that you observed, had observed before observing another object, and that object was pleasant, maybe an unpleasant memory becomes less unpleasant. So because, memories are strongly connected to feelings, therefore, you can never remember the same way. Memories are never the same. Yes, there is memory, there is a factuality that there is memory. Things have been perceived in a way, but it doesn't mean that it's something eternal. It rises and it falls. And then consciousness, which means experiencing, now that is one that obviously is very continuously rises and falls because it rises and falls moment to moment. Now it's here, it's there, it's never the same. It's continuously different because consciousness is always with respect to an object. Now I am, observing this, I am absorbed in this. It's always with respect to some reality. And therefore they also just rise and fall as everything else. So the rise and fall basically means that there is nothing that would be permanent. Everything is, every formation, every experience shall rise, and the moment it has arisen, it is bound to cease. This is what it means, that it comes and goes. For example, doubtful thinking as another feather. It also comes and goes because it doesn't have, you're not eternally doubtful about something. It comes when you give rise to it. It goes away when you don't give rise to it. So that's very much it, that things are not, nothing in the world is permanent. And if you want to abandon the first three feathers, then you look at the, for example, identity view means that you identify with the five aggregates, in most likely with all of them. And then you have to see that there is no I-ness, so to say, in the aggregates. There is form, but does the form have an I? Well, not really, because it simply does its thing according to its nature. It doesn't have a self in it. So when you recognize an object, it is simply, for example, the I recognizes an object, and that's it. So it's not that you didn't do anything. There is just an I consciousness, there is investigation, and then in the mind, like and dislike happens, but it doesn't mean that there's any I, for example, that liked or disliked. Nowhere in the, so to say, cognitive process you can find an I, and there are only cognitive processes. You recognize an object or you are absorbed in an object, but there is nowhere such a moment when you say the I moment. There is no such thing. And if you understand this rise and fall, this is how we started, because we want the mind to touch impermanence, because here, in fact, we speak about the three qualities of all things: impermanence, suffering, and no self. We spoke about these three in the Doors of Emancipations, the three emancipations, so you may check that out. So the point is that you want, because the mind tends to think that everything is permanent. I woke up yesterday in this room and tomorrow I will wake up in the same room. But the fact is that neither the room nor you are the same thing. So it is impossible to even stay in the same room for 2 seconds, because neither the one who stays there nor the room itself is the same. Just an example. So here we want to understand that things by nature are impermanent. If you cling to permanence, you will not see that suffering is there, because the moment you cling to the idea of something permanent, then there is suffering, because in reality it's impermanent, because every moment it changes, but the change might not be very evident at that moment. But that's why I have to penetrate this reality with the understanding of impermanence, that from one moment to the next one, nothing is ever the change, ever the same. So we started this speech, but since then, how many moments have passed? Hundreds, maybe even thousands of moments have passed. So thousand times we have risen and fallen. That is what it means. So this is the very first inside knowledge. You want to shake and break up this idea of, there is permanence. Or for example, about sensual desires. We think that our desires, sensual desires, are something permanent. I like this, that is who how I am, period. But that's not true, because sensual desire is something very particular, because you need an object and you need the sense itself. And even if those two are present, it doesn't mean that you will have sensual desires. You have to see that it also just comes and goes. It's not immediate. So just because there is a pleasurable physical object, it doesn't mean that necessarily there has to be sensual desire. So many times sensual desire seems immediate, but you have to see that it also just rises in you and falls in you. So you understand that it's not something permanent. The moment you understand that it's, for example, impermanent, you cannot hold on to it for too long, because you will understand, I'm holding on to something impermanent. I might as well just not do it anymore. So this is the first insight knowledge. Now, if there's any question from those who are here with me, then please. All right. Okay, so in fact, the insight knowledges are very logical, how they come one after the other one, because in the insight knowledges, you want to see how impermanent things are, how much suffering they bring, and how there is no essence inside those things, those formations. But just because you see things as suffering, impermanent, and no self, it doesn't mean that you are free. You might know this very well, but it doesn't mean that you're free from them. The point is that you want to see truly how all those things in the world really are. The world means samsara, not just a human world. And then you want to get to a point when you are free from these. So this is, you want to make a peak. You want to make a big jump. You want to break through these feathers to be finally free. So the second insight knowledge is, look very logical. I saw how things come and go. How about I look deeper into how they break up? Like, yes, I know that they come and go, so I see the cyclic nature of reality. Now, how about I look very closely how they break up, how these formations dissolve. And this is the so-called the knowledge of dissolution. Now, what does it mean? After having come to be and having ceased, to see that at that moment when, so to say, a formation breaks up, so for example, a certain feeling breaks up, to see how it simply disappears, how it, so to say, doesn't exist anymore. And I will give an example with feelings. So I see that, for example, sensual desires rise and fall. We have spoken about this. They come and then they go. But look at the moment when they go. So for example, even if you, let's say, satisfy your desire for a slice of pizza, as an example, yeah, it arose in you, the desire arose in you, and then it has fallen. But see that the moment it perishes, the desire, it's like, boom, it's over, it dissolved. So it means that you have to understand that around you, even in the room that you stay, things are continuously dissolving, that even the voices are continuously changing, and the moment they enter from one moment to the next moment, between those two moments, there is like a complete, I wouldn't say catastrophe, but there's a complete dissolution. So moment to moment, you can see, for example, even this dissolution, knowledge of dissolution, if you take your palm and start to look at it, okay? Just see how you look at your palm and see that if you look for long enough, you see that moment to moment, it's like you see the palm, but it's like your attention is nowhere. Not because you start to think about something else or that your attention is caught up in another object, but because simply there is no attention. Attention ceases to be, because this is how, in fact, experience really is. Now, if you look at your palm, you see that moment to moment is like, yes, moment to moment you see that it's the palm, but sometimes it's like you don't recognize, or it's like there's no recognition. There's simply like moment to moment, it's like it's gone. It doesn't happen anything, and it's because consciousness in that moment entered like distraction. It fell, and then it will rise again, obviously. So this is how you have to understand this dissolution, that now it is, and then it falls, and then it breaks up, so to say. This is the term that's used, that consciousness broke up and then it's reformed. But in fact, you want to see how all these things break up. So for example, in identity, you see that, for example, my identification with the body now rises and falls. And when it falls, I want to see that it really isn't there anymore. It's over, to the moment when it arises, if it ever again arises. But this dissolution simply means to understand that in this continuous impermanence, things continuously dissolve. So it's like, you could imagine it as like, I would say, matrix. It's like even your sight is not like continuous. It happens moment to moment. So it's like for a very short period of time, it's like things dissolve and then they reform. And this is how you have to see. It's like a waving ocean. It comes out, it goes back, and then when it went back, it's just, it's gone. And this is how you have to see. So the wave comes, it goes back, it comes, it goes back. That would be the rise and fall. And then when it goes back into the ocean, you see that, yes, of course, it will reappear. Well, another wave will reappear. Well, it's never the same wave, number one. And between those two moments of a wave, what is there? You see that it dissolves. It breaks up. Its existence breaks up, and then it reforms in another way. So all the animate and inanimate objects in the world, you have to see as such that in reality they continuously disintegrate, so to say. So because they're impermanent, essenceless, they disintegrate and reintegrate, disintegrate and reintegrate. So this is how you have to see even the body. That, yes, it seems compact. It seems as if it were a self, like it has a self within it, like it is compact. But then you have to see that it rises and falls because there are different processes simply in biology. And furthermore, that at some moment it just breaks up, or even when a being dies, it falls, but you see that it broke up, so to say, the elements within the body, the heat, the viscosity, the different, so the four elements that we speak about in that are in the body of earth, which means the solid, water, the blood can be that, the heat is the fire, and the air, for example, the breath. And you see that moment to moment, these elements just break up and then reappear. Moment to moment, you have to see that this happens moment to moment, all these happenings here, there, they keep jumping from one moment to another one. So it's like they disintegrate and then they come to be again come to be as the waves in the ocean. So this is the knowledge of dissolution. Maybe this knowledge will become even more clear when we speak about the next one, which is the knowledge of dissolving things to be fearful. Now, let's look at this. Imagine that you were a surfer, so you like surfing, and you are in this ocean, and then you imagine that in fact there is continuously a permanent wave that you can surf on. Imagine that that's the only thing that you know in life, how to surf. Just an example. And then you see that in fact, okay, well, the waves come and go, so they rise and fall. All right. Then the waves dissolve at some point, and then they will reappear, but there is a dissolution, so they break up. That is what it means. They disintegrate. And then you realize, okay, so I am surfing on waves that continuously in every moment disintegrate. At that moment, you understand how it is not that you will become fearful, rather you understand that it is objectively fearful to surf on waves that every moment disintegrate and reintegrate. That is like a burning house. That is another good example. That in a burning house, those flames rise and fall. They, of course, sometimes go back into the big fire, but sometimes they also come out. And then you understand that to sit in a burning house, which dissolves things and rises and falls, is quite fearful, because you understand that there is no safe spot. This is the point. Here you want to understand that you cannot land on anything, because whatever shelter you might take, whatever refuge, wherever you would land, it's impermanent. And wherever you put your feet, it will fall off at some point. If you enter a jhana and you say, this jhana is eternal, then you just have to see that there are simply object dependencies, because you concentrate on an object when you enter a jhana, and you understand, okay, the object is not permanent, nor is my attention, so it will at some point fall. So in this knowledge of things to be fearful, it's not that the mind becomes necessarily fearful. It might become a bit like there's a shock, I would say. There's a shock to realize I've been living in a burning house the whole existence. I'm in the whole samsara. And I thought it's pleasant, but it was not pleasant. And now I realize that it's fearful to sit in a burning house, because I might find a shelter, but it's a shelter for 3 moments, and then I must run somewhere else. And you can realize that this running somewhere else happens so many times. That is why we are never satisfied. If we weren't living in a burning house, we would be satisfied with one object. With a slice of pizza, you would be satisfied for the rest of your life. But does it happen so? No. So obviously you jump from one object to the next one, because you are never satisfied, because you understand that things continuously dissolve, continuously rise and fall. And right now you understand, to put your faith, your trust into something, namely the word, that continuously dissolves, and every moment it disintegrates, there is no safe landing spot, because everything is impermanent. Everything brings a taste of suffering, and that's why you understand that it is fearful, shocking, terrorizing to live in to find the safe spot in the 5 aggregates. So to identify with the body, many people take refuge in the body. They say, I am the body, and they feel very satisfied. But if you look at the body with your insight, you understand, okay, well, it can be worm infested. It has a lot of blood in it. If I cut it off, then blood flows everywhere. There are a lot of organs that don't look pretty, and it continuously changes. With every speck of fat, the body has changed. With every speck of blood, the body has changed. And when you realize how, so to say, disgusting in a way it is, you become like fearful. Oh, I took refuge in something which offers everything but refuge. And then you are like, I've been living in a burning house, and right now I realize that I've been living in a burning house. And at that moment, you might realize that fearful things are dangerous. That right now, for example, if you see flames coming out of something, first you become fearful, like, oof, what is happening? Then you realize that there is danger. And this is what happens with the insight knowledge. So you have the 5 aggregates, and you realize, okay, it's fearful to take refuge in any of the 5 because they continuously change, and that it's dangerous to take refuge in any of those 5 because so if you take refuge, even if in a jhana experience, you will understand the danger of being entangled in pleasantness rather than transcending the word, rather than not being, not clinging to it. So this is why it's important to understand it is dangerous to sit in a burning house. And the 5 aggregates are the burning house. So here the one who goes into this insight understands to surf on a continuously disintegrating wave. It's fearful and it's very dangerous because you might hit yourself very hard at any moment. And that is the point. Because whenever a thing is impermanent, you can hit yourself hard at any moment. That is the fact, the factuality. Right now you have a love relation and you take refuge in that, and tomorrow the male or the female dies. Where is your refuge? I'm asking. That is why it's dangerous, because there is no satisfaction. You cannot be well because you always run from the flames. So you understand that it's very dangerous to sit in a burning house, to sit in the 5 aggregates, to cling to the 5 aggregates in any way. You understand it is a burning house. And you can take, for example, feathers like sensual desire, even hate. To take refuge in hate, namely to respond with hate, you understand that it means you hit yourself very hard because you suffer even more, because objects in themselves, we have spoken about this, are not pleasant or unpleasant. Whatever you hold as pleasant or unpleasant comes from the mind, not from the objects. Objects in themselves have never been pleasant or unpleasant. They're objects. You don't take anything away from them, nor add anything to them. Those are what those are. They are not pleasant or unpleasant. So the moment you have hate, you have to understand that you take refuge in something which you obviously observe that is suffering, but because of your clinging, you cannot get rid of it. And then you see that where hate rises and falls, hate is impermanent. Hate brings suffering, and it is dangerous to take refuge in suffering, because then there is even more suffering. So that is the knowledge of fearful things to be dangerous, that whenever something is terrorizing, in the sense that you realize that you go to sleep, but tomorrow you wake up and the whole world is a whole different world, and there is no observer within you. So it is just a whole different existence. Every moment is a whole different existence. At that moment, you understand the danger to dwell in things that are impermanent, because there's always suffering if you dwell in them. So you understand it's very dangerous to live in a burning house. So you saw that it's fearful, you saw that it's dangerous. What would be the next thing that happens? Next thing that can happen is that you become dispassionate. You say, I don't want any of this. So in this knowledge of this passion, simply, because before one took passion, one took delight in the formations, in the aggregates, for example. But now one says, okay, well, they're dangerous. I'm not sure if I want to take any more delight in them, because why should I take delight in something which brings suffering? And, with this logical deduction, one becomes dispassionate. even we might say disgusted, but not disgusted in a way of hate, rather than it is like disillusioning. This is the best word. One becomes disillusioned. These things continuously rise and fall. They are continuously dissolving, and I took delight in them. I took refuge in them. I enjoyed them. And now one becomes disillusioned that that's why I have never been satisfied with anything, because I was still in a burning house trying to find a less hot point, a less hot landing spot, but that spot never existed. So one becomes disillusioned, one becomes dispassionate with these formations. Like, why would I even want to get into them again? This is how you could, say it in words. But this has to be an experience, so it's not just a mere expression of such things. It has to come from understanding. So for example, identity, when you understand, many times people say we have to learn from the past, but the only thing that they have never learned from the past is that identity is created the drama of the world. Whatever war, whatever killing, whatever unwholesome things have ever happened, those were because of identities. That was the only reason. But these people don't see, because they enjoy identities. So at some point they might as well just turn against oneself or each other, because there is identity, there's always the door towards unwholesomeness. So in identities, for example, being at this point would say, why would I even want to enter identities when they don't have any real existence? It happens only in the mind, and look how much nonsense and craziness people do in the name of their identities, and that is the only thing that they do. And one becomes this illusion that identities are not delightful things at all. They are disgusting. There is nothing beautiful in them. They continuously rise and fall. There is nothing to be interested in with respect to identities, for example. And what is the next thing that happens? Okay, I don't want this. And what the meditator says, the one who investigates, says, I want to be free from this. So this is the so-called the knowledge of the desire for deliverance. You want to be delivered from this. You want to abandon all these things. You want to find a safe spot. This is the whole point. So first you saw that the house is burning, it's fearful, it's dangerous. You don't want to stay there, so you want to find something else. Of course, you might not even know what that something else is, but you know that certainly it's not in the formations, because formations are suffering. And obviously then the cessation of formations would be the safe landing spot. It's not a landing spot, obviously. I would say freedom. That is the moment when you can be called free, when there is no more attachment to the aggregates. Because you see, in fact, the aggregates in themselves have no problem. The problem is when there is attachment to them, when there is perversion. And perversion doesn't mean simply sexually. Perversion is anything when you exaggerate reality, and identities are a perversion, because when you see an identity, there's an aggregate: form, feeling, memory, opinion, or experience. And that is what it is. And when you make something big out of it which doesn't even exist, that is a perversion, because it's not there. You over exaggerate something which is not even there. And therefore identities, in fact, all the feathers can be called in a way perversions, because there's no clarity about things. And when you realize this, you say, okay, I don't know where that safe spot is, but certainly is not here. So there's this zeal that, yes, I have seen the world for what it is. Now I want to be free from this. So it's like a heroic utterance. There is no delight in the aggregates, and I might not know where is peace, but certainly not in the aggregates. So there is this knowledge of a desire for deliverance. You want to be out from the burning house. This is what it means. You don't want to sit in a burning house anymore. This is what it means. So you have this knowledge of wanting to be free. Now here it's very important to know that just because you have this heroic zeal that yes, I have seen reality for what it is, let me be free. Here, the next insight knowledge, in fact, is the key. But here, many people might end up in a trap. What is the trap? I want somebody from those who are here with me to answer this.
The trap can be, this is too much. This is just too much to look at. I'm just gonna stop. So they just stop right there because it's a lot to look at and to see and to choose differently. So they just halt right there and go backwards.
So there are two reasons for which one can stop here. In fact, the moment when one can stop because it's too much is when one becomes disillusioned. If one wants to be free from this, there you cannot stop anymore, because so the point when you can stop because it's too much for you is when you become disillusioned, when you become dispassionate. Because at that moment you might feel, I don't even want to go anywhere. So I had a friend who had this feeling, I don't want to do anything again in life. What happened, in fact, was that they became very dispassionate and they couldn't find delight even in going out with friends. And it's good to have this feeling because it means that back then there was an attachment. You still might go out with friends, but why to be so much attached to, in any way, to that? So when things don't become an entertainment, is one becomes disillusioned. And at that moment, so starting from rise and fall to disillusion in oneself, one might turn back any moment. If one has this knowledge of wanting to be free from this, there one can stop, but not because it's too much, because if it were too much, then they would have not gotten to the point that they want to be free. Here one can stop because of this zeal. I have seen reality for what it is. I saw impermanence. And because they say, yes, I want to be free. And at that moment, they might not even feel suffering in the world. They might say, yes, I have seen it, now let me go and enjoy the aggregates. That is the danger in not being insightful. That just because you wanted to be free doesn't mean that you have actually gotten there. As I said, that just because you saw impermanence, it doesn't mean that you have touched the signless. Just because you saw suffering doesn't mean that you have become desireless. Just because you saw the no self doesn't mean that you entered the void. It simply means that you saw finally the nature of reality, but it doesn't mean that you have pushed through and you gotten to the point. So this is here the important thing, that you cannot stop just here. And the next insight knowledge reassures that you will not stop, because the next insight knowledge is the knowledge of reflecting contemplation. It means that, yes, I said, yes, right now I know the reality. And here the meditator looks back at the 5 aggregates. But right now with a clear mind, because previously when they looked at the aggregates, they looked at it with shock, with the sight of terror. And right now, in the reflection of contemplation, they again retake all the aggregates as impermanent, as suffering, as no self. Now here, you are very free to contemplate them, and you think. Here you can think a lot, because it's not in fact thinking, it's insight obviously, but here it is to examine. Here is when you examine things. Oh yes, this is impermanent, and you give another example, because the mind has to be shaken out from this dream of selves, of desire, of passion, and that of permanence. So you say, oh yes, I had that best friend. It's gone. It's suffering. Oh, I have that memory of that best friend. It's also suffering. Oh, I got to meet a new being, but it's suffering because they will die at some point, or I will die at some point, and then they will suffer. And this is how you re-examine, and again you go through them. And here, when you reflect back, you simply see everything, but you no longer have this terror, because you already had this desire to be delivered. So you no longer feel that terror, but you are much more calm, I might say. And then you say, yes, this is suffering, this is impermanence, even my decision is impermanent, so I better continue now, or it might just fall and I might not come back to continue this insight knowledges. So here, one keeps going because one doesn't lose the focus. Yes, this is why I want to go on, because they're still impermanent. And then, after having seen all the formations, again, how impermanent, how much suffering they have, and how they have no self, one becomes equanimous towards formations. Now, this is very important. One becomes equanimous, and that is way different than one becoming dispassionate. Because in dispassion, it's like you are disgusted, you have repulsion, so to say. In equanimity, you might still have repulsion, but it's simply that you are aware, that you are mindful. So we might say it as in a way that there are formations, but I don't take interest in them. I have no interest to take them as myself or as something belonging to me, nor as somebody else or belonging to somebody else. And then there is equanimity towards formations. For example, with identities, it becomes obvious that, you saw that again, it's impermanent, it's suffering, it has no self. And in this moment, you simply you don't have this compulsion to take them as yourself. You are equanimous. There are formations. So you just like, there's this statement within the mind, there are the aggregates, but they are not to be taken as me or myself or mine. So here one becomes completely equanimous with the formations, with the form, with feelings, with past memory, with views, with experience. One becomes completely equanimous. It's like, for that being, the world seems like a mirage, like a living dead, so to say. So there's complete equanimity, like, what is there anyway, so to say. And then the last insight knowledge is the knowledge of, how should we say? There's a very good word for it, and I'm trying to get that good word. So the whole point is that at this moment you become completely, you have conformity, that was the word, the knowledge of conformity. Because one has conformity towards everything that has been seen. So it's like, it so well. There's this conformity, like in the mind there is this preparation in order to break through. That one knows what were the insight knowledges. So one has gone through them, and one knows that now, most like, if things were done well, the past consciousness will come and it will dissolve the feathers for no more ever arising in the future. So this is very important, that in this conformity, well, it simply is that one is, one sees clearly all these things and is ready to break through. Now, this is the point when somebody either enters, the void, or doesn't. So what does it depend on? It depends on whether the being has contemplated well in depth, or it was something on the surface, superficial. If it was superficial, then what happens in conformity? Can they attain conformity? Yes. Can they attain equanimity? Yes. It is only that because there is not too much wisdom, not enough wisdom, in the conformity they will keep seeing impermanence. They will not end up in the signless consciousness or the void or the desireless. So the object will still remain impermanent, suffering, and no self. They will continuously see the formations. So it either happens or it doesn't happen. And if it doesn't happen, what one can do is that they do it again and again, with staying much more on one particular insight knowledge, and penetrating through, and the rise and fall is the most important. If rise and fall was gotten well, all the rest can be done the same way, much more easily. Because the point is that here the mind has to be completely equanimous towards all formations. For example, if we speak about the feathers, so towards identity, towards doubtful thinking, and towards attachment to rituals, one has to become completely, utterly equanimous, and only then it can happen that they enter the void and such things will never again arise in the mind. Till then, they will continuously observe identities and doubts within, only that they will have equanimity towards them, but they will still be present and there will still be attachment. And it is only the path consciousness that destroys, abandons these feathers to a no future arising. So these are the insight knowledges. There are 9 or 10 in total. So you saw that so it's very logical, in fact. So step by step, the being simply cultivates the no self, the suffering, the impermanence, or all of them. Because you see, many times, for example, if you see identity might be very easy to be destroyed by seeing how much suffering it brings, or how impermanent it is. With sensual desires, one might feel that, yes, there's no self really in the being, there's just perception going on. And then one doesn't take delight, because if you are not the enjoyer, then why would you even bother? So different feathers can be, taken with different factualities of impermanent suffering or no self, and it depends exclusively on the being, like what type of path they would take to destroy the feathers. So, but the point is that one has to become utterly equanimous, and only then it can happen that there is a push, breakthrough. Else it doesn't happen. So it might become frustrating if one goes through and at the beginning there is equanimity, and so there's really no delight, you're completely equanimous, but it still doesn't happen. It's because rise and fall was not understood too well, because everything came from the rise and fall. And if the being didn't understand rise and fall in depth, everything that came after is understood to the degree to which the rise and fall was understood, not to a deeper degree. So to the degree to which the being understood how rise and fall happens in identity views, the same way they will see that they are fearful. So if a being doesn't understand rise and fall, they will take delight in it. If they understand some of it, so for example, many beings, will give up religion because they understand that it is many times based on hate, and people don't really want to be free, they just want to pretend that they do. And then in some extent, one doesn't identify anymore. So to that degree, they also understand why it is dangerous to have identity such as religion and such. But it has to be very deep understanding, very deep insight. This is why it's called insight, because if you look deep into it, you want to penetrate it through. And if it's truly understood identities in any sense that they are suffering, only then it's possible to let them go. Else, it doesn't happen. So this is important. Now, if there's any question about this, there's another thing that I want to speak of if there are after the questions. Those are the imperfections of insight. Those are very important, and but only after the questions, please.
Would you please summarize all of the 10 insight knowledges again? List them out, please.
List them out and also just say in one sentence what it is.
Yes, that's fine. I just want to hear them all again, please.
Okay, so the first is the knowledge of rise and fall, which means things continuously appear and disappear with accordance with attention, with the attention given. The second is the knowledge of dissolution, of disintegration, that things continuously break up, and in the next moment is that they reform. So, for example, when I gave the example with the, looking at the palm, at some point your attention is, you don't go to any other object, but your attention is like it breaks up. Your experience, it breaks up and then it reforms. The third one was the knowledge of dissolving things to be fearful, to understand, to sit, to dwell in dissolving things is fearful, because there is no safe spot, no safe point where you could say, I'm free. The next one is the fourth one, the knowledge of fearful things to be dangerous. So you understand that when something is fearful, terrorizing, then there is danger in it. The next one is the knowledge of dispassion, of disillusion. So the being becomes disillusioned, one realizes that things truly are dangerous in the world, in a sense of impermanent suffering and no self. Then there is the knowledge of the desire for deliverance, which means, okay, I have seen enough this, I don't want this anymore. It has to come from the depths of understanding. It's not enough to remember that a being has said it as such. It's important to truly understand it, like, I don't want this anymore because it truly makes me suffer. This is how it has to be understood. Then there is the knowledge, so after the knowledge of desire for deliverance, there's the knowledge of reflecting on contemplation, where the being again takes the formations, the aggregates, and says, yes, the form is suffering because the feelings, and everything, they take it again with a clear mind. So for example, the Visuddhimagga describes this as taking formations as void. So to become absolutely equanimous with them, which would be the next one takes them as void. There is no self in it. And one contemplates the no self quality, and then one becomes, which is the next insight knowledge, the knowledge of equanimity towards formations. So one doesn't take them as me and mine yet anymore. And then the last one is the knowledge of conformity, where the being has this well-rootedness in what they saw and what shall happen, namely the abandoning of the certain set of fetters, for example. So these are the 9 insight knowledges. And the 0th one is if one does it from a jhana perspective, and then they come out of the jhana and they say that it is impermanent, it rises and falls. That is how that can be done. That is the 0th, the knowledge of comprehension. Or it also can mean simply the capability of even understanding rise and fall, to even get there, to even be able to contemplate impermanence, to be prepared. So those are like preparatory. Many times, there are these breathing techniques and everything, but if you look at it, everything should come towards this direction, to just cut it off, to don't depend on anything anymore. And those are like preliminaries, I would say. It's like preliminary work in order to be capable to put the mind on the track of being capable of contemplating rise and fall and the such.
Thank you.
If there's any other question, you may ask even about like a feather or a particular insight knowledge if it wasn't clear, or as you desire. If not, then I want to speak a bit about the impurities in insight. So the point here is, so we take a certain object, namely impermanent, suffering, or no self, correct? So you start to concentrate on objects. Even if you take a form, so you want to contemplate the form as impermanent or bringer of suffering. Then, if you take a form, for example, the form, and you start to concentrate on it continuously, you stick with it, you concentrate, you're attentive towards only one certain thing. What can happen? If you have one pointedness towards an object, because this is what happens if you take the form.
What? What happens, Krishna?
A jhana might appear. I take the form as the object of my concentration, right? After all, this is what I do, because I want to contemplate it as impermanent. And for example, then it might happen that I have zest. Especially zest can come when I have this desire for deliverance. Now then, there can be this zest in the body. Yes, I know this, finally I want to be free. And is it right to have zest in that moment?
Yes.
Well, if you have zest in that moment, you don't understand, or it's okay to have zest because you might not do anything, but how do you have to see that zest?
Yeah, don't stay there.
It's impermanent.
It's impermanent, yes.
Yes, so zest might happen. Even it might happen that, that you close your eyes and you see like more powerful, because even if you close your eyes during the day, you see some color patterns, but it might be that it becomes even more powerful, or that you have these warm or cold sensations in the body, or you have joy, or you start to cry because of how happy you are that finally you see clearly. But the point is that those also rise and fall. So you should not be, many times a being might as well think that those, so to say, impurities in insight are the path consciousness. So one might think, oh, I have touched the path. But it's not so, because the feathers are still there, only that in that moment they are not, because they don't observe them. But it's important, those impurities, they are very, very, there are scriptures which describe them in detail. Now my wish wasn't to describe them in detail, just to say that you cannot enjoy rise and fall, for example. You cannot enjoy any of these, because the whole point is not to enjoy it. The whole point is to see it. When you enjoy rise and fall, for example, you don't do it well, because the whole point was to see that even you're enjoying is rise and fall. Because what does it mean to enjoy? It means that you have pleasant feeling. Why should you have pleasant feeling about rise and fall? After all, it is fearful and it's terrorizing. So you shouldn't feel well, so to say. Well, in the sense of, taking delight in that particularity. You should feel, well mentally, to be ready to contemplate, but not to to find delight in rise and fall, for example, or dissolution. Just keep going with a prepared mind. Just keep contemplating. They do not, yes, these will arise, zeal, joy, tears of joy as well, but know that they're impermanent. So just continuously know that these are impermanent. If you're mindful, they might as well just go away in the next moment. And it is the best thing. If you're mindful of their own true nature, they will pass, and you will just continue to investigate and to contemplate what is to be contemplated. Because with the jhanas, the problem is, if they arise during insight contemplation, that you might start to enjoy too much what you feel. And if you start to enjoy too much what you feel, that's the end of investigation, because you will be over there with enjoying the jhana, because normally it is like a jhana it's like access into a jhana. It's not an absorption, but you have access to a pleasant jhana, and right now you're like, wow, such a good feeling, but it also rises and falls. This is why, I said that you take all formations as the object, because, this good feeling, when it comes into the aggregate of feeling, the simple fact that you experience jhana is consciousness, that you experience with a consciousness. So also that you take, it's impermanent. So don't bother. It will also go away. So no matter how great your joy is in that moment, it will go away. I assure you about that. And you should not deceive yourself to say that, it's so beautiful. No, it's not beautiful. It rises and falls. This is factuality. It rises and falls. It's not neither beautiful nor not beautiful. It is rise and fall. And this is how you contemplate it. So this is in general what we wanted to discuss about insight knowledges. And you see, these are very closely related to jhanas, to feathers, to hindrances as well. So, for example, if the mind is has sloth, then it will not tend to contemplate this. So you have to be, in a pleasant state, so to say. So you have to be prepared that you actually want to do this. So that's all we wanted to say. If there's any question about anything or anything different than these, then please.
We just wanted to add that the rise and fall and the impermanence of things, we didn't really understand way back when why it happened. Like, we kept looking at it going, what is that all about? Is there nowhere here that remains? Like, where? And that, we saw that like really early on, and we didn't really understand it. And it happened a lot in what you could call the other forms. They'd be one way one day, one way another day, and it would perplex us. And so it just had us looking and looking and looking and looking. And you could say, for that one best friend, for that one that we could count on, that would not deviate based upon conditions, perceptions, conditions, yeah, because they would change. And so often we would, even when we were quote unquote younger, we steered clear of groups. We'd be with the one-on-one, because then you could say we held the energy of them being them. They could be them, and they wouldn't have to act a certain way. They could just be themselves and not this or that. And so it was always a perplex. We felt perplexed by it, even in business, when working with peers and so forth. They would change. And we'd look at them and go, all right, what happened to you? Partners would change, and not for the better. We would say, well, like, what happened to you? Is there no foundation in there? And so ever since we were young, we've always been perplexed by the rise and fall of everything here and the impermanence of everything. So it constantly kept us looking for an answer, a solution, as you say, a safe place to land. And, for a moment, we'd have like a safe place to land, and there was like this breath and this, for a bit, for a short bit. And then all of a sudden, we say, all right, that moment's gone. But to know that the void, the ceasing of all of this is quote unquote that place.
Correct.
Yeah, which isn't a place. Yes.
We wanted to remark what you said, that even that one you could count on. And this is the point, that there is simply not a single being you could count on. And there are two types of beings. Absolutely. So those who have not abandoned any feather, for example, you can, in the sense you can count on them, in the way that, but in the sense that, you could count on them, you cannot, because either they will, you don't know when the karmic time for somebody comes and they die, for example. Even if somebody is a fully enlightened being, you cannot count on the fact that they can help you all the time or any time, because they might know that they will go or that you will go soon. So there is nothing to count on, because everything is continuously changing. So there's not much you can do. Yes, for example, a stream enterer can help other beings to become stream enterers, but you cannot count, because they might as well, for example, die. So if you have a master, teacher, they can also go at some point. So this is why it's very important to understand that life is not precious, because many times people say like, life is very precious, you have to take care of it, but they speak about the body. No, life is precious for only one reason. It's hard to have a human birth, so take it and do something very wholesome with it, because else you will end up as a cockroach. Much luck. I don't know any enlightened beings who would speak to cockroaches or anything like that. But even if you don't accept that those are also reincarnated beings, just look at them as they also suffer. There is suffering. Even if you don't accept any of the factualities of karma, you will still see that there is suffering there. And you want to get rid of any suffering within oneself, any mental fermentation. So to know that life is precious is to know that you might run out of time any moment, and you don't know what's next. So that what we know right now for sure is that right now we can perform insight technologies, we can push through, we can let go of feathers. And that's the only thing that we can count on, our own mindfulness. There's nothing else to count on, because it's not a safe, no very safe, so to say.
We concur. Thank you.
And if there is nothing else that anyone would like to add, then thank you very much for listening, and hear you on another speech.
We just wanted to check in. Anyone have any questions before we conclude this recording? Please. And if you don't, that's fine too. What you usually do.
I want to say thank you, Krishna, and thank you, Ma'el. I just need to review this and listen to it again, and that's what I need to do. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's very good. Thank you.
Yes, this is very important, that this is when we can actually do something with our lives, because many times people say that, just an example, that a friend of ours told us, during the pandemic people have changed so much, and I was like, well, if you could show me this, then I might as well accept it, because the true change means path consciousness. The true change means from unwholesome to wholesome, but the real change is when feathers are abandoned. If there are no feathers abandoned, for example, society is a bundle of feathers, you might say that, oh, now, everybody wears masks, but they don't do it out of insight. They do it because they think that their life is precious in the sense of the form. But true change only happens when feathers are abandoned. Besides that, if there's identity, you may quench one identity and another one will grow. So it is a never-ending cycle. If there's identity, there will be continuously identity here, there. You just look at beings. They're incapable of giving up identities. They're incapable many times to think outside of themselves, because they assume that there is a self, and that's why people say that, oh, you cannot be 100% objective, you will be subjective. Obviously, if you have not contemplated at least a bit the no self or the impermanence, you think that you cannot. But the more you penetrate it, you see that everything is black and white. Life is not colorful, nor any formation. Those are black and white realities, and there is nothing to add or take away. It is what it is. So these are very important, these inside knowledges. And at the beginning, you might try to remember which comes after which, but you might as well just check, okay, this is it, that is that. And then you just contemplate, rise and fall, rise and fall. And if you have seen, for example, that the body is impermanent, the perception of it will stay with you. So you will not be able to negate that you actually saw it. You might behave as if you hadn't seen it, but in reality, you will always remember that you saw it. So the moment you have touched something in the sense of wanting, if you have seen the three characteristics of all things, then slowly you tend to go there and to understand more and more. Else, people don't change in reality. Many times you say, oh, you change so much, but in reality, what it means is that normal people change their preferences. Yes, even the path consciousness changes preferences because you will no longer be able to think about, for example, identity or something like this if we speak about Sotapanna or something. So true change comes with insight, not with anything else. Yes, it's also important to do wholesome things and avoid unwholesome things, and to be mindful and to be present and to act out of mindfulness, not out of reaction. But the real change, when something truly fundamental changes in the being, comes with the path consciousness, when feathers are abandoned, not with anything else. So I want you to understand that, for example, even a being with all the feathers can enter infinite space, infinite consciousness, such states, but not because they have any remarkable realization, but just because they can concentrate on an object with continuous attention. So those two don't mean the same thing. So one is to realize the signness, and the other is to attain a jhana. As we have spoken about this, that jhanas are conditioned realities. So you might as well just fall from it, but realization, which is the path and fruit, that you cannot lose because you have gone through a barrier and you cannot undo it. A jhana, you can undo it because you just do something like that, like a sensual desire, and bye your jhana. But when you give up something throughoutly, it means that it cannot arise ever again. If it arises, then it means that it wasn't given up.
Shall we go ahead and conclude this recording?
Yes.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you for being with us.